Hey everybody, welcome back. Let's talk about this. So the VP debate happened a couple nights ago. I apologize for not getting up sooner. Tried to do a video last night, wasn't feeling that good, and didn't have time in the morning to put it up before I went to work. So here we are. Got a little bit of time today, so I think I can squeeze it in now. Anyway, so the VP debate happened. A lot of, I'm sure you probably saw it, but if you're here, I appreciate you tuning in and checking it out and seeing my opinions on it. Anyway, it was a long debate. I think I think JD Vance completely destroyed Tim Walz. Okay, that's my opinion. That's what I think. I think he countered a lot. He pivoted to what needed to be pivoted to. He changed the topic that needed to be changed when it needed to be. He kind of come down on the moderators because they weren't supposed to be fact checking, but then he jumped in and said, you're not supposed to fact check, but since you are, here's what I think. It was a good debate by JD. It was very 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 good. He hit the topics that he needed to. There was a couple things I think he could have done better, but overall, even the topics that he didn't touch on and pivoted to something else, I thought was very good. Even though it wasn't what I wanted him to say, he still did very good, and his responses were spot on. I think he's a very good debater, and I'll tell you what, when President Trump picked him as a VP, I wasn't too sure because I didn't know a lot about the guy. Every time I see him, though, I like him more and more. Even after this debate, I think I think Trump did a spot on job on picking him for the VP because the guy he's perfect as far as debating. I think his debate skills are off the charts. The guy just, like I said, he annihilated Tim Walz. He just wiped the floor with him, and that's what you need in a debate. I thought it was very very good. Tim Walz looked scared. He looked like he was about to cry a couple times, and he fumbled around with his words. He didn't have a lot together. It seemed like wrote a lot of notes down on like what he wanted to counter with, but I don't think he got the message across that he wanted to. And I think maybe Kamala's like, I think maybe she was watching that just pulling her hair out, but that that could just be me. Maybe she was just like, "Oh, he did a good job." Yeah, but maybe that was her reaction, but I don't know. I think she was pulling her hair out. But anyway, let's jump into it. We'll get in here and we'll take a look at this first one here. And like I said, I'm just gonna go over some clips here. There's a lot to get to. This might be a longer video, but let's check this out. The first question that was asked was about um, before the questions come in. They touched on the issue going on with Iran and Israel and what's going on over there, and they touched a bit on the hurricane situation that just happened. Now, Biden, as far as I know, was making a trip down to I think North Carolina. Trump's already been there. He went down to Georgia and did what he could, made a speech, and you know did his thing. Biden's supposed to go down there, I think either yesterday or today. I haven't checked on that, but we'll get back on that. But check this one. We'll check this one out real quick.
Let's get started. Tonight, our country is facing several unfolding crises. The Middle East is on the brink of war. Americans are suffering from the catastrophic impact of Hurricane Helene. And now a labor strike as 25,000 dock workers from Maine to Texas are picketing. We're going to begin tonight with the Middle East. Margaret.
Thank you, Nora. Earlier today, Iran launched its largest attack yet on Israel, but that attack failed, thanks to joint U.S. and Israeli defensive action. President Biden has deployed more than 40,000 U.S. military personnel and assets to that region over the past year to try to prevent a regional war. Iran is weakened, but the U.S. still considers it the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, and it has drastically reduced the time it would take to develop a nuclear weapon. It is down now to 1 or 2 weeks' time. Governor Walz, if you were the final voice in the Situation Room, would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you. And thank you for those joining.
Look, I'm not going to pause this too much because there's a lot to get to, but I'm just going to put this point in here real quick. keep in mind that when President Trump was in office, he was the one that cut funding to Iran. Okay, he cut off all their funding, and they were broke and looking for aid wherever they could. But President Trump knew the possible dangers coming out of there, and put in the Abraham Accords, and he, like I said, he cut off the funding to Iran, and because he knew what kind of a threat that they posed to the world, not just to the U.S. but to the world. He cut that funding off, and when Harris and Biden came into office, they unfroze those assets, and they just ballooned. And then, especially after the Afghan withdrawal, it was it was hands off. They just started doing their thing again. So just keep that in mind.
Bringing home tonight. Let's keep in mind where this started. October 7th, Hamas terrorists massacred over 1,400 Israelis and took prisoners. Israel's ability to be able to defend itself is absolutely fundamental. Getting its hostages back, fundamental, and ending the humanitarian
I do like that he
crisis
acknowledged
in
where the conflict
Gaza.
is started
But
with October 7th.
the expansion of Israel and its
appreciate
proxies is an absolute fundamental necessity for the United States to have the steady leadership there. You saw it experienced today, where along with our Israeli partners and our coalition, able to stop the incoming attack. But what's fundamental here is that steady leadership is going to matter. It's clear, and the world saw it on that debate stage a few weeks ago. A nearly 80-year-old Donald Trump talking about crowd sizes is not what we need in this moment. But it's not just that. It's those that were closest to Donald Trump that understand how dangerous he is when the world is this dangerous. His chief of staff, John Kelly, said that he was the most flawed human being he'd ever met. And both of his secretaries of defense and his national security advisors said he should be nowhere near the White House. Now, the person closest to them, Donald Trump, said he's unfit for the highest office. That was Senator Vance. What we've seen out of Vice President Harris is we've seen steady leadership. We've seen a calmness that is able to draw on the coalitions to bring them together, understanding that our allies matter. When our allies see Donald Trump turn towards Vladimir Putin, turn towards North Korea, when we start to see that type of fickleness around holding the coalitions together.
He didn't turn to them, okay? Look, he established a relationship with them, but he still had that strength through power. Peace through power. He established a relationship with them and kept the peace. That's what he did. He didn't turn to them. He kept the peace by building a relationship with those, with those people in power over those huge countries.
We will stay committed. And as the vice president said today we will protect our forces and our allied forces, and there will be consequences.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, the same question. Would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
So, Margaret, I want to answer the question. First of all, thanks, Governor. Thanks to CBS for hosting the debate. And thanks, most importantly,
he
to the
goes
American
into his
debate.
story. I'm going to skip over this.
Part because my GI Bill, President, with extraordinary gratitude for the. Certainly, I know that a lot of you are worried about the chaos in the world and the feeling that the American dream is unattainable. I want to try to convince you tonight over the next 90 minutes that if we get better leadership in the White House, if we get Donald Trump back in the White House, the American dream is going to be attainable once again. Now, to answer this particular question, we have to remember that as much as Governor Walz just accused Donald Trump of being an agent of chaos, Donald Trump actually delivered stability in the world, and he did it by establishing effective deterrence. People were afraid of stepping out of line. Iran, which launched this attack, has received over $100 billion in unfrozen assets thanks to the Kamala Harris administration.
Exactly what I was
talking about. What do they use that money for? They use it to buy weapons that they're now launching against our allies, and God forbid, potentially launching against the United States as well. Donald Trump recognized that for people to fear the United States, you needed peace through strength. They needed to recognize that if they got out of line, the United States global leadership would put stability and peace back in the world. Now, you asked about a preemptive strike, Margaret, and I want to answer the question. Look, it is up to Israel what they think they need to do to keep their country safe, and we should support our allies wherever they are when they're fighting the bad guys. I think that's the right approach to take with the Israel question.
I completely agree with that. Give them the support that they need, but let them decide how they want to defend themselves. That's I think that's a perfect answer. Like I said, he did really, really good in this debate, and it just goes to show that he's up to the job. I mean, so anyway, we'll move on to the next one. The next one I got here is about the production, about the foreign plants. They're talking about the energy, and Tim Walz come out and said that they're building solar panels here in the U.S., which is true, but the majority of them are being made overseas. And JD Vance did a really good job of countering this. So let's check this one out too.
Is that if the Democrats, in particular Kamala Harris and her leadership, if they really believe that climate change is serious, what they would be doing is more manufacturing and more energy production in the United States of America, and that's not what they're doing. So clearly Kamala Harris herself doesn't believe her own rhetoric on this. If she did, she would actually agree with Donald Trump's energy policies. Now, something Governor Walz said I think is important to touch upon, because when we talk about clean energy, I think that's a slogan that often the Democrats will use here. And I'm talking, of course, about the Democratic leadership. And the real issue is that if you're spending hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars of American taxpayer money on solar panels that are made in China, number one, you're going to make the economy dirtier. We should be making more of those solar panels here in the United States of America. Some of them are, Tim, but a lot of them are being made overseas in China, especially the components that go into those solar panels.
And I'm just going to make a quick point. China does not care about if you're a climate activist or climate change activist, whatever you want to call yourself. China does not care about the environment. They don't. They will do anything and everything they can to make a buck, and if it hurts the environment, they could give two craps less. They don't care, and that's why everything's made over there so much cheaper, because of the slave labor, and they don't care how it's produced as long as they're making money.
So if you really want to make the environment cleaner, you've got to invest in more energy production. We haven't built a nuclear facility, I think, one in the past 40 years.
Senator.
Natural gas, we got to invest more in it. Kamala Harris has done the opposite. That's raised energy prices and also meant that we're doing
Senator,
worse by the climate.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, would you like to respond?
Well, look, we're producing more natural gas than we ever have. There's no moratorium on that. We're producing more oil. But the folks know, and like I said, again, these are not liberal folks. These are not folks that are Green New Deal folks. These are farmers that have been drought one year, massive flooding the next
they
year.
killed the Keystone
They understand that it makes sense. Look, our number one export cannot be topsoil from erosion from these massive storms. We saw it in Minnesota this summer. And thinking about how do we respond to that, we're thinking ahead on this. And what Kamala Harris has been able to do in Minnesota, we're starting to weatherproof some of these things. The infrastructure law that was passed allows us to think about mitigation in the future. How do we make sure that we're protecting by burying our power lines? How do we make sure that we're protecting lakefronts and things that we're seeing more and more of? But to call it a hoax and to take the oil company executives to Mar-a-Lago, say, give me money for my campaign, and I'll let you do whatever you want. We can be smarter about that, and an all-above energy policy is exactly what she's doing, creating those jobs right here.
Governor, your time is up. The overwhelming consensus among scientists is that the Earth's climate is warming at an unprecedented rate. Margaret?
Okay, look. I'm going to show you something real quick here. This is because JD Vance pointed out the fact that a lot of the production that we have is being made overseas, which is true. Look, I'm going to tell you right here. Let me see here. I'll show you this. Get rid of that. So, right here we got largest electric vehicle manufacturers. Tesla's number one. Okay, so we all know that. BYD is a Chinese company, second largest manufacturer, producing around 3 million EV and hybrid vehicles in 23, beating Tesla's production for a second straight year. So look, this is a Chinese company. This is their plants in China. I forget exactly where in China, but a lot of this stuff, minus Tesla, the Elon Musk, the person that they hate because he brought free speech back to Twitter, now X. That person they hate because he brought free speech back to an online platform. They don't like him for it. Other than him and his Tesla company, the next biggest one is BYD, a Chinese company making EVs. So there's that. And was Volkswagen, major player in the EV market, along with GM, they're number 3. Volkswagen, we all know where that's at. That's in Germany. And then you got looks like a startup, EV startup, Lucid Motors. So looks like the majority of it is still happening overseas. Just wanted to point that out. All right, the next one here that I got is we're gonna go ahead and go on. They moved on to the border, and we're gonna check that out now too.
Senator Vance, your campaign is pledging to carry out the largest mass deportation plan in American history and to use the U.S. military to do so. Could you be more specific about exactly how this will work? For example, would you deport parents who have entered the U.S. illegally and separate them from any of their children who were born on U.S. soil? You have 2 minutes.
So first of all, Margaret, before we talk about deportations, we have to stop the bleeding. We have a historic immigration crisis because Kamala Harris started and said that she wanted to undo all of Donald Trump's border policies. Yes. 94 executive orders, exactly suspending right. Deportations, decriminalizing illegal aliens, massively increasing the asylum fraud that exists in our system. That has opened the floodgates. And what it's meant is that a lot of fentanyl is coming into our country. I had a mother who struggled with opioid addiction and has gotten clean. I don't want people who are struggling with addiction to be deprived of their second chance because Kamala Harris let in fentanyl into our communities at record levels. So you've got to stop the bleeding. You've got to re-implement Donald Trump's border policies, yes. Build the wall, re-implement deportations. And that gets me to your point, Margaret, about what do we actually do? So we've got 25 million illegal aliens who are here in the country. What do we do with them? I think the first thing that we do is we start with the criminal migrants. About 1 million of those people have committed some form of crime in addition to crossing the border illegally. I think you start with deportations on those folks.
That's exactly how I thought. Like when they first come out and said that we're going to do a mass deportation, and everybody's like, well, how do you even begin to do that? You start with the criminals that have already broke the law, and we know where they're at. Most of them are in jail. They're taking up space in the jail, space that we don't have in our jails. You start with them. Take the ones that are in jail, deport them. Simple. That's how you start. After that, President Trump's already come out and said it. You work with local law enforcement, work with get the FBI involved, even though I don't like the FBI. Get ICE involved. They've got resources. They can find these people. Okay.
And then I think you make it harder for illegal aliens to undercut the wages of American workers. A lot of people will go home if they can't work for less than minimum wage in our own country. And by the way, that'll be really good for our workers who just want to earn a fair wage for doing a good day's work. And the final point, Margaret, is you ask about family separation. Right now in this country, Margaret, we have 320,000 children that the Department of Homeland Security has effectively lost. Some of them have been sex trafficked. Some of them hopefully are at homes with their families. Some of them have been used as drug trafficking mules. The real family separation policy in this country is unfortunately Kamala Harris's wide open southern border. And I'd ask my fellow Americans to remember when she came into office, she said she was going to do this. Real leadership would be saying, you know what, I screwed up. We're going to go back to Donald Trump's border policies. I wish that she would do that. It would be good for all of us.
Governor, do you care to respond to any of those specific allegations, including that the vice president is, quote, letting in fentanyl and using kids as drug mules, among other?
Look, something that's not talked about, and, well, they're not going to talk about it. And Walz doesn't talk about it here either. The fact that there was over 300,000 kids that were lost at the border, that's insane. That's crazy. How do you lose that many kids? Where are they now? God only knows. And like J.D. Vance said, I hope they're safe because that's a lot of kids that they just lost.
Things regarding children.
the drug mule is not true, but I will say about this, about the fentanyl, because this is a crisis of this, the opioid crisis. And the good news on this is the last 12 months saw the largest decrease in opioid deaths in our nation's history, 30% decrease in Ohio. But there's still more work to do. But let's go back to this on immigration. Kamala Harris was the Attorney General of the largest state and a border state in California. She's the only person in this race who prosecuted
this is a point they keep coming back to.
human trafficking.
They don't actually address the fact that
but look,
it's
we
her
all wanna
policies that
solve
have
this.
let in all these illegal
Most of
immigrants.
us want to solve this, and that is the United States Congress. That's the Border Patrol agents. That's the Chamber of Commerce. That's most Americans out here. That's why we had the fairest and the toughest bill on immigration.
Look, they keep going back to this bill, okay? And I've said it 100 times. There was 60 or 70 billion dollars going to Ukraine, and then 10 billion going to the bill, or to the border rather. Not a single penny of it was going to the wall. There was more money of it. The only other person that I've seen actually raise this point is Steven Crowder, and Libby Emmons did it on Timcast IRL a couple nights back. And I appreciate them for doing that because they have a giant audience, a lot more than I do. I mean, I get a few people watching here, but the fact that it shouldn't even be called a border bill because you've got so much money going to Ukraine, and that's the fact that they keep saying, "Oh well, Trump shot this down." Well, for one, he wasn't in office, and for two, when you've got 70 or 60 or 70, I forget the actual number, it's somewhere in there, 60 to 70 billion dollars going to Ukraine, and you got 10 billion of it going to the border. You cannot call that a border bill. You can't. It's not a border bill. It's a Ukraine bill. That's why it was shot down, not because of the fact that President Trump made a phone call and is running on an issue instead of solving the issue, because that's not the case. It got shot down because of the fact that there was way too much money going to Ukraine again. And then, literally not, like I said, you can't call it a border bill. Zelensky just showed up in the U.S. again a couple of days back and then left again. Now, the initial report when President Biden sat down and the official number he gave was $2.4 billion. So he come in here and then left again with another $2.4 billion. And then there was another report that I read that it was $8 billion that he left with. So that's crazy. The guy's already gotten so much of our taxpayer money, and we just keep giving it to him. There's never been any other country that's gotten so much of our money. It's insane. Where's all that money going? Can anybody tell me? Anyway, you can't call it a border bill. It's a Ukraine bill. That's why it was shot down. But they keep coming back to it.
That this nation's seen. It was crafted by a conservative senator from Oklahoma, James Lankford. I know him. He's super conservative, but he's a man of principle, wants to get it done. Democrats and Republicans worked on this piece of legislation. The Border Patrol said, this is what we need in here. These are the experts. And the Chamber of Commerce and the Wall Street Journal said, pass this thing. Kamala Harris helped get there. 1,500 new border agents, detection for drugs, DOJ money to speed up these the adjudications on this, just what America wants. But as soon as I was getting ready to pass and actually tackle this, Donald Trump said no, told them to vote against it because it gives him a campaign issue. It gives him to, what would Donald Trump talk about if we actually did some of these things? And they need to be done by the legislature. You can't just do this through the executive branch. So look, we have the options to do this. Donald Trump had 4 years. He had 4 years to do this. And he promised you, America, how easy it would be. I'll build you a big, beautiful wall. And
He
Mexico
started
will
it.
pay for it. Less than 2% of that wall got built, and Mexico didn't pay a dime. But here we are again, 9 years
At
after
least
he
he
came
started.
down that escalator, dehumanizing people and telling them what he was going to do. As far as the deportation plan, at one point, Senator Vance said it was so unworkable to be laughable. So that's where we're at. Pass the bill, she'll sign it.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, the question was, will you separate parents from their children, even if their kids are U.S. citizens? You have 1 minute.
Margaret, my point is that we already have massive child separations thanks to Kamala Harris's open border. And I didn't accuse Kamala Harris
300,000
of
kids.
inviting drug mules. I said that she enabled the Mexican drug cartels to operate freely in this country. And we know that they use children as drug mules. And it is a disgrace, and it has to stop. Look, I think what Tim said just doesn't pass the smell test. For 3 years, Kamala Harris went out bragging that she was going to undo Donald Trump's border policy. She did exactly that. We had a record number of illegal illegal crossings. We had a record number of fentanyl coming into our country. And now that she's running for president, or a few months before, she says that somehow she got religion and cared a lot about a piece of legislation. The only thing that she did when she became the vice president, when she became the appointed border czar, was to undo 94 Donald Trump executive actions that opened the border. This problem is leading to massive problems in the United States of America. Parents who can't afford health care, schools that are overwhelmed. It's got to stop, and it will when Donald Trump is president again.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, what about our CBS News polling, which does show that a majority of Americans, more than 50%, support mass deportations?
Yeah.
Look, we fix this issue with a bill that is necessary, but the issue on this is what happens when you don't want to solve it. You demonize it. And we saw this. And
all right, he just keeps talking about the fact that, you know, they, like I said, they just keep bringing up the border bill. That's their defense for everything having to do with the border. They bring up that border bill, which didn't fund the border. Like I said, keep funding Ukraine. And by the way, we keep sending all this money to Ukraine, but now Kamala Harris was down in one of the states that affected by the hurricane and said that they're going to give $750 to each person affected. But what's that going to do? Buy him a hotel room for a night maybe, and then buy him some food? But then Zelensky can leave the country with another $8 billion because that's okay too. But anyway, it's crazy to me. Look. Anyway, this next clip, this is going to be, this is when I told you in the beginning, JD Vance, they actually tried to fact check him after they said that they weren't going to do it, and then he got on to him about it, and it was priceless. Check this out.
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected status.
Well, Margaret, but
thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret,
you see, they tried to cut him off.
We're going to turn now to the economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
the rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check. And since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP One app where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That is the facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by our own leadership.
Thank you, Senator, for describing the legal process. We have so much to get to, Senator.
Those laws have been on the books since 1990.
No, they haven't.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The CBP One app has not been on the books since 1990.
Yeah. That app, look, they cut his mic there because he was going to rebut what Tim Walz said about the 9. I say no, it hasn't, because he's talking about the app. Now there might have been something in there about the bill, or about her being able to grant that kind of status. But look, the app is new. It's something that the illegal immigrants have been using, and it's a workaround to get illegal immigrants into the nation. And like in Springfield, Ohio, you got 20,000 Haitians that have come in due to this app and are just destroying that economy. That's what JD Vance was trying to get across, but they cut his mic off, and yeah, and then this is crazy. Now this is I want to show this because this is just, yeah, check this out. You got to see this. This is shoot, I forget her name, but this is just somebody, this woman, she's saying that JD Vance is trying to mansplain because the two moderators were women. So he was trying to mansplain his way over and talk over them, which wasn't the case. He was just trying to get his point across because they fact-checked him and they weren't supposed to. That was part of their rules, and they weren't supposed to do it. That's why he went off on them, and rightly so. But this woman, left-wing media. Anyway, check this out. This is crazy.
With the vice presidential in the Harris-Pence debate, where she's like muting powers.
Yeah,
and I actually think if you're a woman, that might be the worst moment J.D. Vance had, because he was going to mansplain right over that mute button. He was, and again, I don't pretend to know how everyone will react to this. I think that a lot of women in positions of authority that should command respect just by virtue of that dynamic will see themselves in some dude that disrespected them and talked over. I mean, there was a moment like that with the vice presidential in the Harris-Pence debate where she's like mute.
The left-wing media is losing their minds because I think they know. Internal polling from the Harris campaign, I think they know they're going to lose. And the left-wing media is losing their minds, trying everything that they can to give Kamala that bump that she needs, because she never got a bump from the presidential debate. She never got a bump after the DNC. It's just she's not popular, and people see it every time she opens her mouth on something that's not scripted. People just like her less and less, and the fact that she hasn't put out anything. She's put out some policies. Took a while for her to even do that, and then she just even copied and pasted from the Biden page. But it took her a while to get those out, and even with those out, the only thing she talks about is the abortion issue, and she's going to give free money away, $25,000 for first-time home buyers, and $50,000 to small business startups. There's never any details about how it's going to happen. At least with President Trump, you know how he's going to do it. He's going to lower the costs by manufacturing energy here at home. We're going to stop getting energy from overseas. We're going to drill here. We're going to manufacture our energy here. That's how we lower costs. Anyway, next clip here is they were talking about the experts keep telling President Trump one thing and he was doing another. And the Democrats, they listen to the experts, but under President Trump, during his 4 years minus COVID, the economy was booming. People had more money in their pockets versus, look, you had, when President Trump was in office, on average, people had $4,000 a month more than what they did under Obama. Now, under Harris and Biden, the average family has to make $17,000 more every year just to live. That's crazy to me. And I feel it too. And everybody I talk to feel it. I know people, like I said, I've said it before, I know people that are using credit cards to buy groceries, which shouldn't be the case. You shouldn't have to do that. Anyway, let's take a look at this.
You have a minute.
Governor, you say trust the experts. But those same experts for 40 years said that if we shipped our manufacturing base off to China, we'd get cheaper goods. They lied about that. They said if we shipped our industrial base off to other countries, to Mexico and elsewhere, it would make the middle class stronger. They were wrong about that. They were wrong about the idea that if we made America less self-reliant, less productive in our own nation, that it would somehow make us better off, and they were wrong about it. And for the first time in a generation, Donald Trump had the wisdom and the courage to say to that bipartisan consensus, we're not doing it anymore. We're bringing American manufacturing back. We're unleashing American energy. We're going to make more of our own stuff. And this isn't just an economic issue. I mean, I've got three beautiful little kids at home, 7, 4, and 2, and I love them very much.
J.D.
I hope
Vance
they're in bed
nails
right now.
him
But
on
look,
every topic.
so many of the drugs,
I
the
loved
pharmaceuticals that
his-
we put in the
I
bodies
loved
of our
his
children
debate. It
are
was
manufactured
spot
by
on.
nations that hate us. This has to stop, and we're not going to stop it by listening to experts.
Excuse me.
We're going to stop it by listening to common sense wisdom, which is what Donald Trump governed on.
Senator, your time is up. Governor Walz, can you address that? I mean, voters say they trust Donald Trump on the economy more.
They do.
Why?
If you're listening tonight and you want billionaires to get tax cuts, you heard what the numbers were. Look, I'm a union guy on this. I'm not a guy who wanted to ship things overseas, but I understand that, look, we produce soybeans. And
These people, the Democrats are losing the unions. They're completely losing them. Look, the Teamsters poll that come out and said that a majority, like it was 60-something% in Michigan, said the Teamsters, 60% of them favor Donald Trump. They're losing the unions. Look at the strike that's going on now, too. They are losing unions, and they're trying everything they can to get them back, but they are completely losing I'm telling you, President Trump, he's going to win every swing state. I'm telling you right now. They are losing so much support because they can't get their crap together.
Corn. We need to have fair trading partners. That's something that we believe in. I think the thing that most concerns me on this is Donald Trump was the guy who created the largest trade deficit in American history with China. So the rhetoric is good. Much of what the senator said right there, I'm in agreement with him on this. I watched it happen too. I watched it to my communities, and we talked about that. But we had people undercutting the right to collectively bargain. We had right to work states made it more difficult. We had companies that were willing to ship it over, and we saw people profit. Folks that are venture capital in some cases, putting money into companies that were overseas. We're in agreement that we bring those home. The issue is Donald Trump is talking about it. Kamala Harris has a record, 250,000 more manufacturing jobs just in the...
How many manufacturing jobs went overseas during Harris-Biden? How many? Tell me that number. You won't. Look, I'm telling you, the tariffs thing that they keep attacking, the tariffs are going to raise your taxes. It won't. I've said it in a previous video. The tariffs are going to be put in place to keep manufacturing jobs in the U.S. That's the whole point of them. So that you charge too much for the overseas on the tariffs. Charge those overseas companies, that they're sending their factories overseas. You charge them too much that it's not going to be profitable for them to have that company in a foreign country. Make it so that they stay here in the U.S. and have U.S. jobs and U.S. manufacturing. That's the point of it.
Out of the IRA.
May I respond to that?
Yes.
So appreciate that. So if you notice, what Governor Walz just did is he said, first of all, Donald Trump has to listen to the experts. And then when he acknowledged that the experts screwed up, he said, well, Donald Trump didn't do nearly as good of a job as the statistics
that's a
show
gross generalization.
that he did. So what Tim Walz is doing, and I honestly, Tim, I think you got a tough job here because you've got to play whack-a-mole. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver rising take-home pay, which of course he did. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver lower inflation, which of course he did. And then you simultaneously got to defend Kamala Harris's atrocious economic record, which has made gas, groceries, and housing unaffordable for American citizens. I was raised by a woman who would sometimes go into medical debt so that she could put food on the table in our household. I know what it's like to not be able to afford the things that you need to afford. We can do so much better. To all of you watching, we can get back to an America that's affordable again. We just got to get back to common sense economic principles.
I hope we have a conversation on healthcare then.
Look, everything that he just said is facts. Okay, he nailed them with that response. And like I said, this debate was very cordial. It was very professional for the most part. There was no personal attacks on JD or Tim Walz. They went after the policies that each candidate has put forward, and the fact that President Trump can run on his record and Vice President Kamala can run on her record it's by far the biggest thing that everybody's looking at, because you can see that Kamala's been in office for the last 3.5 years, almost 4, and President Trump had 4 years, pretty much 3 because of COVID. Because pre-COVID, everything was fine. COVID came in, everything got jacked up. But even after that, right before President Trump left office, it was still really good. It started coming back down and got back to normal right before President Trump, left office. So, and all Kamala and Biden had to do was just leave things alone. It would have been fine. But they had to change everything because they hate Donald Trump and made the country just 10 times worse. So, anyway. Yeah. All right, then they do move on to the abortion, and it's a touchy subject for everybody. You've got a big following on one side, you got a big following on the other. My personal stance on it. We'll get into this.
And maybe you're free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me. But as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. That is, I think,
That's
whether
not
you're
true.
pro-choice
Yes,
or
it is.
pro-abortion,
Not how the law is.
Yes,
that
it is.
fundamentally barbaric. And that's why I use that word, Nora, is because some of what we've seen, do you want to force Catholic hospitals to perform abortions against their will? Because Kamala Harris has supported suing Catholic nuns to violate their freedom of conscience. We can be a big and diverse country where we respect people's freedom of conscience and make the country more pro-baby. And
look, JD's response to this is, it's as good as you can actually get it to be, because he's not outright, and a lot of pro-life are condemning him for this, but when you've got such a divided country on this topic, it's really hard to just side with one side of it or the other. I think what I think. I don't think abortion should be a thing. It's not a form of birth control. It shouldn't be. But I can see where him and President Trump are coming from. They've got their personal beliefs, and I know JD Vance is pro-life and he's family oriented, but they've got to, it's a very touchy subject for a lot of people. So, but I think he handled it very, very well, and his response was really good with it.
Pro-family, but please.
Yes, Governor, please respond.
Look, this is one where there's always something there. This is a very simple proposition. These are women's decisions to make about their healthcare decisions, and the physicians who know best when they need to do this. Trying to distort the way a law is written to try and make a point, that's not it at all.
What was I wrong about, Governor? Please tell me, what was I wrong about?
That is not the way the law is written.
Yes,
Look,
it is. It is.
But how?
It was amended. It was the law said that at first, before they amended it, it was that if there was a botched abortion in the state of Minnesota, the doctor had to perform care to that baby just like any other person. They changed that law. They revised it and made it, they don't actually have to. There was actually 10 botched abortions in Minnesota that the babies died after the birth.
And this advice on a lot of things, that getting involved, getting engaged, that's been misread, and it was fact-checked at the last debate. But the point on this is there's a continuation of these guys to try and tell women or to get involved. I use this line on this, just mind your own business on this. Things worked best when Roe versus Wade was in place. When we do a restoration of Roe, that works best. That doesn't preclude us from increasing funding for children. It doesn't increase us from making sure that once that child's born, like in Minnesota, they get meals. They get early childhood education. They get health care. So the hiding behind we're going to do all these other things when you're not proposing them in your budget, Kamala Harris is proposing them. She's proposing all those things to make life easier for families.
I asked a specific question, Governor. You gave me a slogan as a response.
It's not the case. It's not true. That's not what the law says. So they fact-checked it with President Trump.
Yeah. He doesn't actually answer it. So, but like I said, it's a tough situation. It's a tough question. It's a tough issue, but I think JD handled it pretty well and answered it pretty much the only way that he actually could. But anyway, I'm gonna move on to the guns. They brought up the gun violence in America and the fact that it's the leading cause of death in kids. But that includes, when they ask that question, they don't mention the fact that it actually includes mass shootings and inner city violence, and all that other stuff. It includes all that stuff, and that's why it's so high. But they talked about this. We'll get into this here.
Here's something that really bothers me and worries me about this epidemic of violence. The gross majority, close to 90% in some of the statistics I've seen, of the gun violence in this country is committed with illegally obtained firearms. And while we're on that topic, we know that thanks to Kamala Harris's open border, we've seen a massive influx in the number of illegal guns run by the Mexican drug cartel. So that number, the amount of illegal guns in our country is higher today than it was 3.5 years ago. But what do we do about the schools? What do we do to protect our kids? And I think the answer is, and I say this not loving the answer, because I don't want my kids to go to school in a school that feels unsafe or where there are visible signs of security. But I unfortunately think that we have to increase security in our schools. We have to make the doors lock better. We have to make the doors stronger. We've got to make the windows stronger. And of course, we've got to increase school resource officers, because the idea that we can magically wave a wand and take guns out of the hands of bad guys, it just doesn't fit with recent experience. So we've got to make our schools safer. And I think we've got to have some common sense bipartisan solutions for how to do that.
Governor, you have 2 minutes.
Well, I think all the parents watching tonight, this is your biggest nightmare. Look, I got a 17-year-old, and he witnessed a shooting at a community center playing volleyball. Those things don't leave you. As a member of Congress, I sat in my office surrounded by dozens of the Sandy Hook parents, and they were looking at my 7-year-old picture on the wall. Their 7-year-old were dead, and they were asking us to do something. And look, I'm a hunter. I own firearms. The vice president is. We understand that the Second Amendment is there, but our first responsibility is to our kids to figure this out. In Minnesota, we've enacted enhanced red flag laws, enhanced background checks, and we can start to get data. But here's the problem. If we really want to solve this, we've got folks that won't allow research to be even done on gun violence. And this idea that we should just live with it, here's what I do think, that this is a good start to the conversation.
Just live with it.
I 100% believe that Senator Vance hates it when these kids, it's abhorrent and it breaks your heart. I agree with that. But that's not far enough when we know there are things that worked. I've spent time in Finland and seen some Finnish schools. They don't have this happen, even though they have a high gun ownership rate in the country. There are reasonable things that we can do to make a difference.
There's a different reason for the gun violence.
And the idea to have some of these weapons out there, it just doesn't make any sense. Kamala Harris, as an attorney general, worked on this issue. She knows that it's there. No one's trying to scaremonger and say we're taking your guns, but I ask all of you out there, do you want your schools hardened to look like a fort? Is that what we have to go? When we know there's countries around the world that their children aren't practicing these types of.
Look, just real quick here. I'm sorry for pausing it again, but look, this is just my take on it. This is what I think. One of the things that we could do possibly. This is just, like I said, this is my take on it. Arm the teachers. I know there's a lot of people on there. Look, I became a teacher to teach, not to be a security officer. I understand that. That's fine. If you don't want to carry a weapon, you don't have to. But for the teachers out there that would like to actually have a little bit of protection, get them trained. Don't just let them have a gun willy-nilly. I'm not saying that. Let them go through a course. Get them the training that they would need in order to protect their students. The teachers that want to carry, like I said, take them through a course. Let them be trained up. Have it, and I would support. If they want to carry, you have at least, I would say every 2 or 3 months, you go through training every time, just to keep your training up. Because if you only do it like once a year, that's not enough. You train, your mind goes to other things. You forget. Keep that training fresh in the teachers' minds that actually want to carry. I know it's, like I said, I know a lot of people, if you don't want to carry, that's fine. A lot of teachers go into teaching to teach, not to be security guards. I understand the reasoning behind that. But if you're a teacher and you want to protect yourself and your children, then I think they should be able to. That's just my opinion. Don't come down on me too hard for it, but that's just how I feel about it. Anyway.
Of drills. They're being kids. We owe it to them to get a fix. These are things that shouldn't be that difficult. You can still keep your firearms, and we can make a difference. We have to. If you're listening tonight, this breaks your heart.
Senator.
Tim, first of all, I didn't know that your 17-year-old witnessed a shooting, and I'm sorry about that, and I hope that he's doing okay. Christ have mercy. It is awful.
It's terrible.
And I appreciate what Tim said actually about Finland, because I do think it illustrates some of the frankly weird differences between our own country's gun violence problem and Finland. Is okay. First of all, we have way higher rates of mental health abuse or mental health substance abuse. We have way higher rates of depression, way higher rates of anxiety. We unfortunately have a mental health crisis in this country that I really do think that we need to get to the root causes of, because I don't think it's the whole reason why we have such a bad gun violence problem, but I do think it's a big piece of it. Another driver of the gun violence epidemic, especially that affecting our kids, it doesn't earn as many headlines, but is the terrible gun violence problem in a lot of our big cities. And this is why we have to empower law enforcement to arrest the bad guys, put them away, and take gun offenders off the streets. I think there's a whole host of things that we can do here, but I do think at our schools we've got to talk about more security.
Agree. There should be more security. Like I said, just my opinion on the teacher thing, but there's I'm sure there's other ways that we can do it, but without making our schools look like a prison. I've seen a lot of those and it's sad. It shouldn't be this way, but unfortunately it is. I've seen schools that have fences around them, barbed wire, all that. It looks like a prison, and it shouldn't be that way. It's a school. Unfortunately, in today's day, that's one of the things that has to be done. Now, I know my kids go to school, and I think that they've got it protected as pretty good. They don't have fences around it. It doesn't look like a prison, but they do have other things implemented, and they've got the resource officers there, and maybe have one more instead of just one. Because a lot of schools just have one resource officer. Maybe put 2 of them in there. Maybe that'll help a little bit. It's more of a deterrent than anything else. If they know there's a police officer that's on station at the school, a lot of people, won't try anything. But some of them still will, regardless. But it's a sad situation that we're in, and it's hard to maneuver around it without making anyone upset about what you're doing. It's hard. It's a difficult situation. But this next one's on the housing, and we'll get into this.
But we can't blame immigrants for the only reason. That's not the case that's happening in many cities. The fact of the matter is that we don't have enough naturally affordable housing, but we can make sure that the government's there to help kickstart it, create that base.
Governor, your time is...
Look, the housing situation, the fact that there's not enough resources, lumber, shipping costs is too much, and J.D. Vance gets into it. Tim Walz and Harris want to just magically make it start happening, whereas J.D. Vance and President Trump, it all comes down to energy, and it really does. And J.D. Vance and President Trump, they hammer it home every time they talk about this issue. You start producing energy here at home, prices come down. That includes, like J.D. Vance is going to tell you, when you produce oil here at home, gas prices go down, shipping costs go down, and lumber goes down because of that. It's just the way it works. Once the gas is low, everything else, the price drops on everything else. The reason you're paying $5 a loaf of bread is because of the fact that gas is so high, and it takes a lot of money to ship it to the stores. So.
Is up. Senator Vance, as far as your campaign's position, the promise is to seize federal lands to build homes, remove regulation, provide tax breaks, and cut back on immigration, which you say pushes up prices. Where are you going to build all the new homes you're promising, and what part of any of this plan will provide immediate relief? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Tim just said something that I agree with. We don't want to blame immigrants for higher housing prices, but we do want to blame Kamala Harris for letting in millions of illegal aliens into this country, which does drive up costs.
Pass the Ukraine bill.
25 million illegal aliens competing with Americans for scarce homes is one of the most significant drivers of home prices in the country. It's why we have massive increases in home prices that have happened right alongside massive increases in illegal alien populations under Kamala Harris's leadership. Now, Tim just mentioned a bunch of ideas. Now, some of those ideas I actually think are halfway decent, and some of them I disagree with. But the most important thing here is Kamala Harris is not running as a newcomer to politics. She is the sitting vice president. If she wants to enact all of these policies to make housing more affordable, I invite her to use the office that the American people already gave her, not sit around and campaign and do nothing while Americans find the American dream of homeownership completely unaffordable. Now, you asked, Margaret, what would immediately change the equation for American citizens if you lower energy prices? As Donald Trump says, drill, baby, drill. One of the biggest drivers of housing costs, aside from illegal immigration, is, think about it. If a truck driver's paying 40% more for diesel, then the lumber he's delivering to the job site to build the house is also going to become a lot more expensive. If we open up American energy, you will get immediate pricing relief for American citizens, not, by the way, just in housing, but in a whole host of other economic goods too.
Yep. Exactly right. Drill, baby, drill. That's President Trump says it all the time. It's going to lower everything, and it will. It will. And look, I just want to show you this here. Transfer this over here. All right, now I don't know why this is, transparent here, but we'll take a look at this. Now I'll show you this. Now right here, let me see if I can highlight it. This. Okay, so right there. On it, December, February. So February, that's after Trump left office right there. And everything just goes up. That's the immigration. That's border crossings under, this is all the way to January 24, April 24. It just skyrockets after President Trump leaves office. And they want to claim that border crossings are down to where they were when President Trump left office, and it's not true. It has gone down. You can see it there. But I mean, look at all the crossings that have happened between them. So I just wanted to point that out real quick. All right, the next one here is just on the censorship, and we'll take a look at it real quick.
It is the threat of censorship. It's Americans casting aside lifelong friendships because of disagreements over politics. It's big technology companies silencing their fellow citizens. And it's Kamala Harris saying that rather than debate and persuade her fellow Americans, she'd like to censor people who engage in misinformation. I think that is a much bigger threat to democracy than anything that we've seen in this country in the last 4 years, in the last 40 years. Now, I'm really proud, especially given that I was raised by two lifelong blue-collar Democrats, to have the endorsement of Bobby Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, lifelong leaders in the Democratic coalition. And of course, they don't agree with me and Donald Trump on every issue. We don't have to agree on every issue, but we're united behind a basic American First Amendment principle that we ought to debate our differences. We ought to argue about them. We ought to try to persuade our fellow Americans. Kamala Harris is engaged in censorship at an industrial scale. She did it during COVID. She's done it over a number of other issues. And that, to me, is a much bigger threat to democracy than what Donald Trump said when he said that protesters should peacefully protest on January the 6th.
It's absolutely right. Look, and J.D. Vance made a good point, and Tim Walz tries to rebut and say that, he talks about Minnesota as his rebuttal. But anyway, during COVID, censorship was all kinds of crazy. During the 2020 election, censorship was all kinds of crazy. You had the sitting president that was taken off of Facebook, Twitter, and another one, but I forget. But just taken off all of them, just in the same day. And Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook has actually come out and said that, yeah, there was a lot of stories that we throttled on Facebook because of the fact that the FBI came to us and said that this was misleading or misinformation. He's come out and said it. And said that they're going to be a lot more vigilant this election cycle, which there's been a couple times where they haven't been already. But that's just, I don't expect it to change anyway, even though he said that it would. But I mean, it's just, yeah. Anyway, go ahead and take a look at their closing statements real quick, and then we'll finish up here. Appreciate you staying with me this long. It's been a long video, it's a long debate, so let's take a look.
Well, thank you, Senator Vance. Thank you to CBS News. And most importantly, thank you to all of you. If you're still up and the folks who miss Dancing with Our Stars, I appreciate it. But look, the support of the democracy matters. It matters that you're here. And I'm as surprised as anybody of this coalition that Kamala Harris has built, from Bernie Sanders to Dick Cheney to Taylor Swift, and a whole bunch of folks in between there. And they don't all agree on everything, but they are truly optimistic people. They believe in a positive future of this country and one where our politics can be better than it is. And I have to tell you, that better than it is the sense of optimism that there can be an opportunity economy.
Better than it is.
That works for everyone, not just
your running mate is in office now.
And the idea that freedom really means something. Not the freedom of government to be in your bedroom or exam room, but the freedom for you to make choices about yourself. Now, look, we all know who Donald Trump is. He's told us, and as Maya Angelou said, believe him when he told you that. His first inaugural address talked about American carnage, and then he spent 4 years trying to maybe do that. Senator Vance tonight made it clear he will stand with Donald Trump's agenda. He will continue to push down that road. Excuse me. Kamala Harris gives us a different option. Now, I'll have to tell you, I'm going to be careful about the quotes, but there's one that Senator Vance said that does resonate with me. He said, Donald Trump makes the people I care about afraid. A lot of America feels that way. We don't need to be afraid.
It's not, he didn't
Franklin
say the
Roosevelt
people that
was
he
right.
cares about.
All we have to fear is fear itself.
He said that
Kamala Harris
made
is bringing
the
us a
foreign
new
leaders
way
afraid,
forward.
which
She's bringing us
should
a
be the
politics
case.
of joy. She's bringing real solutions for the middle class.
Joy is
and
not
she's
what the country
centering
needs
you
right now.
at the heart of that. All the while asking everyone, join this movement, make your voices heard. Let's look for a new day where everybody gets that opportunity and everybody gets a chance to thrive. I humbly ask for your vote on November 5th for Kamala Harris.
Look, I'm not taking. I think Tim Walz did the best that he could during this debate, but he just got flustered. He was still professional. I still think he did a good job. I think he did better than Kamala did, but all Kamala did was try to bait Trump into getting angry, which she did, which I give her credit for that. But J.D. Vance looked scared. He looked unprepared, and he didn't have the right talking points, I think. But as far as his endorsements that the Democrats have got, a bunch of celebrities, I think it's more impactful that President Trump has RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard and Vivek and Elon Musk. I think it's more detrimental that they got those because, like J.D. Vance said earlier, they don't agree on everything, but it really is becoming the party of unity because, like I said, they don't agree on everything, but they've come together because they do have a common goal of making America great and getting us back to America first and taking care of our people instead of foreign people. That's just, America should come first.
Governor Walz, thank you. Senator Vance, your closing statement.
Well, I want to thank Governor Walz, you folks at CBS, and of course the American people for tuning in this evening. And one of the issues we didn't talk about was energy. And I remember when I was being raised by my grandmother, when she didn't have enough money to turn on the heat some nights because Ohio gets pretty cold at night and because money was often very tight. And I believe, as a person who wants to be your next vice president, that we are a rich and prosperous enough country where every American, whether they're rich or poor, ought to be able to turn on their heat in the middle of a cold winter night. That's gotten more difficult thanks to Kamala Harris's energy policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford a nice meal for your family. That's gotten harder because of Kamala Harris's policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford to buy a house. You ought to be able to live in safe neighborhoods. You ought to not have your communities flooded with fentanyl. And that, too, has gotten harder with because of Kamala Harris's policies. Now, I've been in politics long enough to do what Kamala Harris does when she stands before the American people and says that on day one, she's going to work on all these challenges I just listed. She's been the vice president for 3.5 years. Day one was 1,400 days ago, and her policies have made these problems worse. Now, I believe that we have the most beautiful country in the world. I meet people on the campaign trail who can't afford food, but have the grace and generosity to ask me how I'm doing and to tell me they're praying for my family. What that has taught me is that we have the greatest country, the most beautiful country, the most incredible people anywhere in the world. but they're not going to be able to achieve their full dreams with the broken leadership that we have in Washington. They're not going to be able to live their American dream if we do the same thing that we've been doing for the last 3.5 years. We need change. We need a new direction. We need a president who has already done this once before and did it well. Please vote for Donald Trump. And whether you vote for me or vote for Tim Walz, I just want to say I'm so proud to be doing this, and I'm rooting for you. God bless you, and good night.
All right. So there you go. I mean, pretty good. I mean, like I said at the beginning, it was a good debate. It was professional. No personal attacks against each other. There was attack on policies, and that's the way the debate should have gone. And I thought it was very good. I think JD won just because he seemed more prepared. He pivoted a lot better, and I think overall he was better. So, but I know that was a longer video. I appreciate you hanging out, and I appreciate it again, and I hope you all have a good day.